Hello class, it's Ms. Roberts here with another mini lecture. I'm going to take the time to go over the slides, upload them onto YouTube, and they'll be there for you to enjoy. Hope everyone's doing well. Let's go ahead and get started. Please excuse the noises from outside. But, excuse me. I wasn't able to upload the Zoom meetings. My apologies. I'm still working on getting the kinks out of the whole Zoom recording process. So hopefully next week will be better. My apologies. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So this week we're going to be exploring nonverbal communication. Move me to the side here. And when we define nonverbal communication, is messages, information communicated by non-linguistic means. Last week we discussed language and the importance of language in regards to interpersonal communication. Now we're going to explore different parts of nonverbal communication that is equally important to the message by both having the verbal or script or written message in addition to the nonverbal cues. You can have a better understanding of what the other person means and is talking about. Okay. So let's clear up some myths and misconceptions about nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is always occurring. We've heard of the phrase, you cannot not communicate, with your double negatives there, meaning you're always communicating, nonverbally or otherwise. It is relational, so you have different nonverbal techniques and different nonverbal rules for each person. The closer you are to the person relationally, the closer you can be. We're going to talk about that or exemplify that through proxemics in just a moment. I'm going to pause the video because I have my window open and everybody wants to make noise right now. Hold on just a moment. Alright, I'm back. Thanks so much for your patience. I wanted to have the door open in order to get some air in the apartment, but now I realize how loud it was. Let me continue. Finally, nonverbal communication is ambiguous. So, although, and not to contradict oneself, but nonverbal communication is only a piece of the communication puzzle. So, it can help you clarify a message, but getting verbal confirmation is the ultimate way to clarify that message. Let's go ahead and continue. So next we have emblems. Now in the Zoom chat, we talked about how different emblems or different nonverbal signals can replace verbal communication. So for example, what does this mean? 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 The following nonverbal signals are examples of American emblems, culturally understood substitutes for verbal expression. Now, because it's culturally based, you have to be careful. If you do some traveling, you have to make sure that some of the emblems that you use as an American doesn't offend someone in another culture. So for example, using the okay sign means okay in America, but in some cultures it's obscenity. So you want to make sure to double check. And that's what we talked about in the culture chapter. As far as part of being a competent intercultural communicator, you want to make sure to just double check, make sure you're not offending anyone. Next, we have regulators in communication. So, for example, in a verbal exchange, especially face-to-face, We have certain nonverbal cues to help us know when one is speaking and the rules of speaking. So for example, when someone's done talking, we close our mouths. We finish talking. Because rules of politeness, we talked about that before, we don't want to talk over anyone. Okay? Another part when someone else is kind of finished talking is they might look away from the conversation. Or if someone's not paying attention as well, they might give you a blank stare like this. So regulators are cues that control verbal interaction, and eye contact and other gestures can play a part in regulatory speaking. Nonverbal communication can also help us out in other ways. We can use nonverbal communication to capture attention. A. Hello. Hi. So we can use nonverbal behavior to capture attention, show liking. For example, we're going to talk about oculesics in a minute. Prolonged eye contact demonstrates liking. We can also generate power with nonverbal communication, standing up tall and straight, having a strong, consistent tone in your voice or some ways to indicate power. You can also boost credibility nonverbally. I discussed this in my public speaking class, in my public address class, when we have our persuasive speeches. I always tell my students to stand up, have strong, consistent eye contact with their audience, and speak with conviction. Don't have a tentative or powerless, throwback to chapter 4, powerless tone in your voice. Speaking of your voice, I want you to think of something. We discussed this in our Zoom meeting, but I asked the class, how do we know if someone is lying? Some of us might talk about or might say lack of eye contact, stuttering, long pauses, and you're right. Now, like we said before in the first in the first slide, nonverbal communication can't tell you the whole story, but can tell you part of the story. So some of the ways that you might be able to catch someone telling a non-truth: speech disturbances, speech disturbances such as stuttering, a lot of ums and uhs, trying to think of the next slide to tell, long pauses, and the pupils dilate. So you won't be able to see in a conversation, like, oh, is your pupils dilating? But they did test that in the lab. We also use nonverbal communications to manage our impressions. Think about when you're going to a job interview. You want to look as competent as possible because you want to get the job. Think about first dates. I talked about how some aspects of first dates and job interviews, they have a lot more in common than you think. When we are going to these events, we want to dress well, speak well, show confidence, show competence in all these areas. So the way that we do that is with our mannerisms. We adjust how we act in a given context. We adjust our appearance, so we dress our best. And even though setting isn't related to the job interview example, when you think about your room or your space or your home, what you put in it and how you decorate it reflects who you are. And you can also manage impressions. Say, for instance, if you have a visitor, we manage impressions by how we decorate our homes. Next, we have body movement. So the study of body movement in nonverbal communication is called kinesics. And the way we act, our mannerisms. People study that to see the underlying meanings of our body movements. One subset of this is oculesics. So it's the study of eye contact and how we use eyes to communicate. So for those who have romantic partners, or for those of us who are going on dates and things like that, prolonged eye contact, culturally of course, is an indication of liking. But if they're looking away, it doesn't mean they don't like you. They might be a little bit shy, but prolonged liking can be a good sign that things are going well. But like the last point mentions, eye contact is defined by culture. For instance, in some cultures, having direct eye contact is a form of respect. In other cultures, looking away is a form of respect. Then we also have posture. Let me scooch this over here. In the Zoom meeting, I talked about how sitting in the chair versus standing up to lecture, I have to be cognizant of my posture. I don't have a dining room set. It's just me and my brother. I'm screwing this over. Because in the chair, I might be like this in normal circumstances, or like this, or just like this, going online. But when I am with you guys, and you see my little microphone here, I have to stand straight and sit up tall. Because I want to portray competency and authority through my nonverbal body language. So posture can be a part of that. And gestures, do you talk with your hands or do you just lay them flat on your lap? Those are some things that can indicate status and power. Let's see. All right. Touch. Boop. I like to do that on camera. But what is touch in regards to nonverbal communication? Well, the study of touch is called a haptics. You might have heard this term when we talk about cell phones and its haptics capability. That means you can control it by touch. Now, when we talk about relationships and touch, there's only a few people in this world that can go, boop, you'd be okay with it. For example, if you drop your wallet and you turn around, let me back up a little bit. So you're walking and you drop your wallet, but you haven't realized it yet. You feel a tap on your shoulder. You look around and you see a stranger. Your first instinct would be a little bit of alarm. Who's that touching my shoulder? What's going on? They hand you their wallet and everything's okay. However, if that same scenario happened, you get a tap on your shoulder and you look around at your friend. Oh, how you doing? You're a little bit more relaxed because you have a closer relationship and bond. So that tap on the shoulder is no big deal. I'm going to explore this more with proxemics in just a moment. But before we do that, let's talk about voice. Now, this can be a little bit confusing because verbal communication, that's verbal communication versus nonverbal communication. Not quite. So what you say verbally is verbal communication, obviously. But the way you say a verbal message is nonverbal communication. For example, it's the difference between "How are you doing?" versus "How you doing?" See the difference? Those are two very different "how you doings." Let's explore some more parts about the voice. So when we talk about nonverbal communications in the voice, we are referring to paralanguage, the way that the message is spoken. This can include vocal rate, how fast or how slow you talk, the tempo, so the tone and cadence of how you talk, vocal variety that includes pitch, tone, and volume, and your accent, so that can tell us culturally where you're from. We also have disfluencies like and like. So we want to make sure that if we're doing a presentation, we want to reduce those as much as possible. Okay. Next, we have proxemics. Let me move my screen down here a little bit. All right. So as I probably mentioned to you in class before, that I took the bus for 8 years. I didn't own a car until I was 28 because I didn't have a lot of money. So I remember being on the bus, and if there weren't a lot of people on the bus, it was great because I had seats to myself. However, it'll get more crowded and more crowded and more crowded. So there'll be empty seats. Someone will sit by me, and then we're like, "Aw, I feel a little sad because I didn't have the seats to myself." Why did I feel this way? Let's look at the Edward T. Hall's zones, or proxemic zones. When we talk about proxemics, is how communication is affected by the use, organization, and perception of space and distance. So there's 4 different zones that dictate how far apart we are from people and the relationship. First, we have public distance, 12 feet plus. Social distance, 4 to 12 feet. Personal distance, 18 inches to 4 feet. And intimate distance, 18 inches to skin contact. Now, when we're talking about public distance, we're talking about if we're out and about, we're all spread out because we're out in public. Excuse me. We're all spread out and there's no way we'll be near each other. Social distance is usually reserved for like malls and grocery stores where you have enough room to maneuver, but you're in more close proximity to each other. Next, we have personal distance. So that's the distance that sometimes you might share with your classmates or you and me might share. So that's 4 feet to 18 inches. If I was able to do this in class, this is what I would do. So I will have a student over here, and then I will be over here in the farthest part of the room. And then what I would do, I will get closer and closer. But as I'm getting closer, I will ask the student, hey, is this an okay distance? It's an okay distance. And I'll get closer. Now, one of the rules of this exercise with me and students is that I never get too close to go boop to someone. Won't do that because that's personal distance. And I try to try to account for height differences and my height. One of the ways I do that, I spread my arms and go this way. And you will ask, why would I do that? Well, I'm gauging usually your arm span is approximately the same length as your height. So by doing this, I am indicating that this is my personal bubble, more or less. One of the reasons I have to compensate for height is because I'm not a very tall person. My personal bubble might be relatively closer than someone who's maybe 6 feet. So if I am getting closer to someone, and especially if someone's way taller than me, then I will stop myself way before my arm span, if that makes sense. But when we go from personal distance to intimate distance is you're breaking that personal bubble. I don't think my arm span is 18 inches. I have pretty short arms. But it's when you break that personal bubble to skin contact. Okay? So I never do this during that exercise. But intimate distance are usually reserved for your 3 main groups. Some exceptions to this rule are maybe your doctor, so your doctor has to examine you, so they have to break that bubble. Or, don't do this, what these guys are doing. But if you're on the bus or if you're on a train, public transportation, people within reason are in your space, but it's accepted because of the situation. So let me go ahead and... So finally, we have territoriality. I give the example in class. One of the things, and I've done this before too, where if you sat in that particular seat within like the first week of class, you're going to sit there until the last day of class. Unfortunately, we're not in our classes anymore. However, that's a thing. And I always ask students, if someone sat in your seat, how would you feel? Now, some students are really nice and really cool with it, but a lot of students are like, no, get out of my seat. And I ask why. None of our names are on it. We're only here for about an hour and a half. But it's that sense of territoriality. I've been sitting here. I want to continue to sit here. It's mine. Our desks are an extension of our physical being. Let me go back. I'm going to end with time. So finally, we have chronemics. It's how humans use and structure time. And when we talk about how time is thought of in a society and who could be late, who could not be late, that's a nonverbal signal. So for example, some cultures are monochronemic and polychronemic. Monochronemic means that the culture adheres to a timetable. That's what the US is. Usually when you are expected to be someplace at a certain time, and time isn't very flexible. With polychronemic cultures, it's the opposite. 3 o'clock might mean 3:15, and time is more fluid in its understanding. Waiting can be an indicator of status. You don't want to keep your boss or your parent or anyone else waiting, especially if there's an inequity of power. But if you have the power and if you keep someone waiting, you might not get a lot of flack for it. Okay, speaking of time, time is up. I briefly reviewed nonverbal communication, what it means, different aspects of it, such as haptics, chronemics, proxemics, kinesics. Make sure to review your book, and if you want to, the chapter outlines that I have available on Canvas. Please let me know if there are any questions, and I'll create a separate video discussing the paper because my Zoom meeting did not save. That's okay, but please let me know if you have any questions. All right, good evening, everyone. Bye.